Check all my settings. Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm just checking all my settings, waiting for everyone to file in. Good afternoon if you're in the East Coast time. Good morning if you're in West Coast or in the middle of the state or country, wherever you might be. So I see people are finding the chat. Let me know if you can hear me. Somebody tell me in the chat if you can hear me and see me. That's so helpful. Yes, I appreciate that. I can hear and see you. Yay. Good. That helps. That totally helps. Holy smokes. Look at you guys all coming in. This is fantastic. I'm going to just give everybody a minute to get in here while we're all settling in. I see all of you, hi Lynn, are settling in, figuring out Zoom. If you don't already know it, there is the chat feature. I know there's a big question about, is there a recording that's going to be available? Yes, I have made this decision to have a recording available. So yes, there will be. It'll be available probably for a couple weeks. And so I do want to, and then there's also the option, I can do a private webinar for your organization at your time, whenever that might be, whatever day or time is of your preference. So that's always available too. So I want to let you know that. So let's check here. I love to reward those who are on time. I love to be on time. So I think we're going to really kick off and get going. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being here. And I mostly want to thank Lynn Walsh for making this all happen. I'm going to guess that you all know Lynn. And if you don't, you're missing out. But Lynn is a dream come true, and she's responsible for me even being in your face right now, being a part of me supporting the lab animal community. She's the first one to reach out to me when I started my business 5 years ago in regards to compassion fatigue, and she said, hey, have you considered the lab animal community? And I was like, no, I didn't. I was embarrassed to say that. I didn't. And boy, am I so glad that I am now a part of the lab animal community, and supporting you makes my heart swell. So I want to thank Lynn, MSMR. You are amazing. So thank you for that. I also want to thank all of you that are attending today. I know that, you're either working in a facility or you're working from home, or some combination of that. These are unprecedented times. And I honor you, and I honor the gift that you're giving yourself of an hour just to focus on you, which I know is something that it's hard to do, especially in our busy lives. So, I have a slide deck for you. I'm also going to speak to you about technology. In the event that something happens with the internet, I have my phone over here as a backup. So sit tight. I will make that happen. And if I need to, I will re-record this whole thing so that there's a clean recording. So I've covered every base I can. And I want you to sit back. I want you to get rid of all the distractions right now, because again, I want you to focus these 60 minutes on yourself. You are so critically important to the world, to yourself, to your family, and certainly to me. So I'm going to pick up my deck here and just get that up, and you'll still be able to see my face over on the side if you want to, if that's even something you care to do. So let me just make this big. Okay. So I'm going to stay connected with you. All right. So here we are, radical self-care for radical times. Oh, geez, these are radical times. Who am I? You're probably wondering. I've got a lot for you, so I'm going to go at a quick pace. I'm a New Yorker, so this is just how I roll. I live in upstate New York, and my passion on the planet is to support people who work with animals. My passion has become supporting the veterinary field, the lab animal field, and I do support the animal welfare field to some degree as well. And it started just as this deep desire to want to help people maintain their mental health and well-being while doing super challenging work. And all three of those communities that I support have very different challenges. And when I get to be with your community, my heart always feels so full because, and sometimes I get emotional, so here it goes, but because to a large extent, I think that a lot of your pain and suffering goes unnoticed. It is to some degree invisible by the general population, even animal workers. And I will tell you that someone being on the outside of your industry, I don't think you're going to find a bigger advocate than me. And I know that's a tall order, but I am so in love with all of you and the work that you do. And I am so excited to share whatever knowledge and help that I might have in the hopes that it helps you. So I come at this very differently than probably lots of people as it relates to compassion fatigue, because I'm also a life coach. So compassion fatigue, I can teach you about that. I'm pretty sure you can teach me about that. You know all about compassion fatigue. So where I think hopefully that I am making a difference in the world is in relation to, well, what do we do about it? How do we help ourselves? And that's really what this presentation today is designed to do, is to help you with what do you do about it. As you can see, I love pigs. It's my friend's sister, Mary Frances. I also love pugs. So, oh yes, I happen to own a couple pugs, even one in a wheelchair, and they're behind me right now. And what I'm also unapologetic about, and this is so important for this conversation, is that I'm unapologetic about self-care. And I want you to be unapologetic about self-care. The thing about self-care is that we misunderstand it, to be quite honest. We think it's about bubble baths, and it's largely misunderstood and misrepresented, and we tend to think that it's something that we have to purchase. And I really want to change your concept of that, of what self-care truly means and how we embody it in our lives and in our work each and every day. So with that, here's where I'm going with this webinar today. I will, of course, touch upon like what is compassion fatigue, because I don't know the audience. There may be people who have never even heard of the word before. So I want to address that. But then I want to spend the majority of time talking to you about strategies. And the strategies that I teach really fall into three categories. I teach a lot about mindset, because at the end of the day, the only thing you can ever control is what you think. And I'll explain why that's important. I will also spend time on really what self-care is on the physical, or as it relates to practices and intentions. And then I deeply want to talk with you about, processing emotions, and what do we do when we are feeling ourselves like I know so many of you are right now, feeling so much emotion, so much sadness, so much grief, so much uncertainty, anxiety. Fill in the blank. There's a lot of emotion to go around in the world. And then certainly there's a lot of emotion that's now added on to you being a human being in the world with COVID-19, and then you also working in the lab animal community, and how your community is having to try to adjust in relation to that. And I know that is increasing a lot of these negative emotions. And at the end of this webinar, I have an invitation of how I can continue to support you. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't know if I was the only one up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was up and I thought, and all of a sudden I had this idea about how I can support you going forward. I had a wonderful conversation yesterday with Dr. Cindy Buckmaster, and want to thank her for her passion. But one of the things that I left the conversation with was just understanding again, or being reminded that many of you don't have a lot of support. It's hard for you to talk to your family and friends about what you do. They may or may not be supportive. They may or may not understand. It's also hard sometimes to get support in your organizations from people who have different roles within the organization, because they don't totally understand either. It's also hard to get support from EAPs when the counselors don't have the insight either into what your world is like, what your work is like. So stick with me at the end, and I will invite you to a way that that I can help you. And that's my purpose on the planet, is I wake up thinking about how can I support, how can I support, how can I support. All right, continuing on. You still with me? I hope so. I start basically all of my talks in relation to compassion fatigue with this quote right here, that the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be affected by it is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water without getting wet. So if nothing else, this is my time to normalize the way that you feel. Of course, you are impacted by the work that you do, by what's going on in the world, by what's going on as the industry is trying to cope with COVID-19, animals in facilities, what do we do with all of that, studies, all of it, all of it. Of course, you would be affected by that. You would be abnormal to not be affected by that. And why this webinar matters so much is because you're affected by three things so deeply. You're affected, of course, by compassion fatigue. And another word for compassion fatigue is secondary trauma. So compassion fatigue in and of itself is when you're witnessing the pain and suffering of another being and it has an effect on you. That's, you're being traumatized secondarily. You're seeing another in trauma or pain and suffering, and that has an effect on you. That is compassion fatigue. So of course, that's part of your world. And it's part of everybody's world right now with COVID-19, right? The other thing, of course, is that you are susceptible to burnout. And burnout is different from compassion fatigue. There is no trauma component to burnout. Burnout exists when we ask people to do too much with too little. And you don't have to look far in any industry to find burned out people, because that is commonplace in our world today, is we ask people to do too much with too little. So too much with too little could be we're asking people to take care of too many animals with not enough human beings, not enough supplies, not enough resources, not enough time. It could be all of that. And again, there's no trauma component. You can be burned out if you work at Home Depot. You can be burned out right now if you work at the grocery store, if you're a grocery clerk. And then the third thing to really talk about here is primary trauma or primary traumatic stress. And that happens to you, that's happening to some of you right now. I do know, again, that some of you are being directed to cull populations because of the lack of researchers, because all the studies have been canceled, because the staff has been decreased, all of those, that and the impact that that's having on you right now, that's primary trauma. And that is for sure real. And if you are not aware of that, and if you don't understand that you have to attend to your own needs, you'll have a very hard time dealing with all of this now. So I really want to make that plea, and I'm going to talk so much to you about that. And the truth of the matter is this. The truth of the matter becomes that we don't get compassion fatigue because there's anything wrong with us. We don't get it because we're weak, or we're in the wrong job, or we can't handle it, or we're too sensitive. And nothing irritates me more than when I hear people say, oh, well, she's a sensitive Sally. No, you're not a sensitive Sally, you're a human being. Human beings have emotions. And as long as we are human beings, we will have emotions. And when we don't have emotions, that becomes a problem. Having too many emotions has never been a problem. Really, it hasn't. I know that might be a tough sell for some of you. But the reason we get compassion fatigue is because we care. We care. You know, those of you that signed up for the webinar, you're on my Friday email list, and some of you may have received that today. One of the things that I said in that email is, and again, feel free to opt out. You can unsubscribe. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but one of the things I said in the email was sociopaths don't get compassion fatigue. We get compassion fatigue because we care. But the other part of that is we also neglect our own needs. And like I was saying earlier, where you can be neglecting your own needs is not having an outlet to be able to deal with the emotions that you are feeling as it relates to the work, as it relates to the current situation. And, you know, what can happen sometimes is that we find ourselves feeling either apathetic or a little bit numb. And I want to suggest for your consideration that it's not that our compassion runs out. If you find yourself in that numb place, it's not that we don't care. It's that literally what happens is our hearts get so filled with grief that there literally is no room left to care. And that is why it's so deeply important to learn the importance of processing our emotions, learning how to grieve, learning how to give ourselves time to feel what we're feeling and allow emotions to be there. I'm going to talk more about that. And I know at first there's probably some of you that are getting squirrely in your seat, like, oh no, we're going to talk about emotions. Yes, we are. We are going to talk about emotions. They're the best part about you. And I know so many of you are feeling invisible right now. And I want you to know that I see you. I want you to know that I see your pain. I want you to know that you matter. I want you to know that what you're experiencing is a normal reaction to some abnormal circumstances. And like I said, I have a way to help you at the end here. So stick around. All right, let's continue on. This might look familiar to you. You might look like, or it might feel like in your life that it feels like there's an imbalance. And to me, I believe that that's what compassion fatigue is. It's an imbalance. It's where more of our energy is going out to give and to serve others than is what's coming back in the tank. Easy for me to say. In other words, are we replenishing for ourselves at the same rate of which we are extending of ourselves? And the vast majority of you, I already know the answer is no. The majority of human beings that are drawn to animal work are women. Why is that? Well, there could be lots of reasons for that. And I know they aren't all. I know they're dudes. I know there are binary folks too, like that don't identify either way. That I get it. But the large majority are identifying as women. And that is what's hardwired and what is socially drilled into many of us women is this sense of sacrifice. And sacrifice does have a price. And I really want to encourage you to reconsider how much of your energy is going out versus how much is coming back in. And again, that will be made a little bit more clear as we go on. So in the chat box, give me a level of 1 to 10. I want to see a number. So your current level of self-care. Let's say 1 is like almost non-existent, and 10 is it's so great that I'm going to hand the controls over to you and you're going to teach the webinar. Saying 87652. Whoa, they're coming so fast. 525818349 6-ish. Not seeing any zeros. That is good. I'm glad to know you're all still with me. So they're all over the place. This is what I expect. Okay. So 6.5. I like people who just don't want to commit either way. I'm sort of like that too. And here's what I want to suggest. I want to suggest that if you're not an 8 or better, then there's room always to level up a little bit. And for the vast majority of us, you know what? There's always an opportunity to level up. You know, I'm a life coach. I teach about, self-care, and I have improved a lot, but there are times when, I find myself at a 3 or 4 and I need to level up. So let's just get the compassion fatigue and defining terms right out of the way. And I love to use this visual for you so that you understand there's 2 sides here. When you're looking at your professional quality of life, it's an equal formula, if you will. The right side is the compassion fatigue, and that is the negative aspects of the work. But I want to draw your attention to the left-hand side too to show you that there is an equal and opposing force, which is called compassion satisfaction, which is the good parts of the work. So like we already talked about, compassion fatigue by definition, it's that emotional, physical, psychological, and even spiritual exhaustion that we feel when, again, we are repeatedly exposed to others' pain and suffering. And that is not unique to lab animal. It's not unique to animal workers. It really encompasses many, 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 many professions, as you can imagine, right? But today we care about you. And there are so many things that contribute to compassion fatigue. Sometimes it's just the providing of care for large numbers of animals all the time, especially those that might be exhibiting signs of disease and illness, and what that then brings to the table. The nature of the research that's being done, if it's toxicology research, if it's research that results in comorbidities, terminal studies, working with colleagues. Again, if we're working alongside of people who are tapped out, it's not very hard to get sucked into that sense of cynicism, complaining, and blaming. That inherently is what compassion fatigue ends up looking like. Euthanasia, culling populations, taking down populations, like all of that, of course, contributes to compassion fatigue. And burnout as I explained to you already, it's a little bit different, but it certainly contributes to compassion fatigue. When we're being asked to do too much repeatedly, that does chip away at our resilience to be able to deal with all of the other things. And then lastly, what I have here is also work-related trauma. And work-related trauma can encompass anything because trauma is in the eye of the beholder. And I think this is really important. I'm guessing I have varying levels of attendees on this webinar. I have animal caregivers, I have maybe researchers, I have veterinarians, I may have investigators, and I want you all to consider that, again, trauma is in the eye of the beholder. What is traumatic for one person may not be for another. And I want to guard you against minimizing somebody else's experience and thinking, oh, that's not really that big of a deal. Because it may not be for you, but it may be for somebody else. And work-related trauma right now might be, like we've already talked about a little bit, if you have been directed to take down populations or community, or because of what's going on with staffing and quarantine and this whole COVID-19. So that, of course, would be work-related trauma as well. So I want to just give you an opportunity, like things that I've hit on already. I'm curious to know in the chat, like if you can give me in 2 or 3 words, because they're going to go really fast. So many of you on here, but I want to have an appreciation for what is difficult for you specifically, like right now. Is there anything that I've hit on? Can you put anything in the chat of, you know, a couple terms? Wasted animals, necropsy, euthanasia, euthanizing healthy animals. So I'm seeing this coming up. Culling, everything's an emergency, working from home, euthanasia, scared. Yeah, uncertainty, not enough time, culling, euthanasia, people insisting on moving forward, overtaxed, unknown what will come next, unexpected clinical signs in euthanasia, unable to quarantine, culling, cutting back, working from home. Yeah, it's so interesting to see so many of you working from home. I leaving my animals. Oh my gosh, I love you people so much. Overreacting to COVID symptoms. I'm with you. I've had COVID like 5 times already in my mind. And I'm joking about that just because clearly I don't, but everything that happens, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this it? And, you know, I laugh at myself working from home with kids. Oh my gosh. Yeah, oh my gosh, you put so many good things in there. And feeling helpless to help from home. Yeah, that's come up so much. And I really want to honor that. I really want to honor all of you that because of your dedication and love for your animals, it's killing you to be at home. And I really, really, really want to honor that. And I really want to hold space for the sadness and the disappointment that is around all that. And perhaps the grief that comes with that too. Oh my gosh, you guys are being home alone. Yeah, and I also want to speak to that. Those of you that, you know, do live by yourself, I so encourage you to, you know, find alternate ways. I'm going to talk a little bit with that to stay because it's accumulating time. All right, continue on. What I think we really need to talk about is this whole concept of moral stress, because this is also a lot of what's going on right now. So moral stress is this term that relates to when policies or procedures conflict with our own morals and beliefs. That came through very loud and clear when you were talking about euthanizing healthy animals. And that is a lot of what you're experiencing right now for so many of you. And, you know, it has a name because it's a real thing. And, you know, unfortunately, like there's no solution around that. Moral stress exists in the world. And here's how we combat it. How we combat it is that we take such good care of ourselves that when these types of situations come along and knock us out from behind the knees, that we are able, because we've taken such good care of ourselves, we have some reserve to pick ourselves back up and to stand up and go, okay, all right, I hated how this went down. I hated that this is what we had to do, but yet I have the reserve to go on. I have the reserve to be sad about it. I have the reserve to give myself a little space, understanding that I know if I take good care of myself, I have the resilience, again, to move through it. And that's all we get to do is to move through it. Right? I mean, I shouldn't say that's all we get to do. You can also choose to not move through it. and not moving through it is not a great alternative, because then we get stuck here. And let me let you in on a secret about emotions. Emotions are energy. I will teach you exactly where they come from, but they're energy. They're literally physical sensations we feel in our body. And if you try to suppress energy, you know what happens. It builds up. And eventually when we suppress energy, aka emotions, so long, eventually we explode. And that often is not in good ways. So I really want to encourage you to learn how to process your emotions. And I will speak with you, but we're going to do a little exercise here that I felt really compelled to do with you. And what I want to talk about is the other thing that you have the opportunity for right now is self-compassion. You know, you need it now more than ever. Decisions are being made beyond your control, right? Populations are coming down against your wishes. This is a time for self-compassion. This is a hard time. And if you don't love yourself right now, you'll have a very hard time moving through this. This is the time to develop a relationship with yourself like you've never developed before. I'm going to tell you the truth. I am seeing this whole situation that we're finding ourselves in the world as an amazing opportunity for personal growth. And I'm going to invite you to join me on that journey. We get to decide how we're going to be on the other side of this. And, you know, I'm deciding to be better on the other side. And I want to reach out and extend my hand to have you come with me on the other side of this and be a better version of yourself. And what I want to do with you now is just a quick self-compassion exercise. Many of you I know are home alone, but if you're with other people, I ask you to do this exercise with me, and don't even care if other people are looking at you. Because we're going to close our eyes anyway. So if everyone that you're with, even though, and again, I know you're practicing social distancing, but I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. And all you need to do is listen to the sound of my voice. I'm going to ask you to take both of your hands and place them over your heart. And for a moment, see if you can feel your heartbeat. And when you feel your heartbeat, just have an acknowledgement to yourself in this moment that here you are, giving yourself a little of your time and attention, living in the world that is challenging. And I want you to bring to mind one thing right now that is causing you pain and suffering, just one thing. And with your hands over your heart, I want you to say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. And now say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. And say to yourself, may I be kind to myself in this moment. And again, with your eyes still closed, just sort of reconnect to the feeling of your heart beating. And if it feels right to you to sort of lightly bow your head to your heart, acknowledging who you are in the world, acknowledging that you're somebody that deeply cares. And if you are feeling any pain and suffering right now, it's because you deeply care. And take a deep breath in. And on the exhale, get rid of anything that's not serving you right now. Anything. Another deep breath in. And on the exhale, release anxiety, stress, grief, sadness, overwhelm. One more deep breath in, deepest breath you've taken today. And on the exhale, let go of something that you no longer need in this moment. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. Okay, my friends. I'm with you. I'm feeling you. I'm feeling your love from wherever we all are in the country and in the world. Okay. Like I said, compassion fatigue. Yes, they're the negative aspects, but it's not all that. There's an equal and opposing force, compassion, satisfaction. It's the reason you do what you do. You didn't sign up for an easy profession. That tells me so much about who you are. I was thinking about that this morning. I was thinking, like you signed up for work that really deeply matters, and it's challenging and it's hard, but you still show up for it physically, emotionally, mentally. And I get it. There's things that beyond your control right now. Don't go down that road. But the vast majority of the time, when you're able to, when the government or your company isn't telling you you can't come to work today, you're showing up. And it's so vital that you honor that part of yourself. And it's so vital that you honor what you love. I have not once been to a lab animal facility working with folks like yourself where I am not always struck by the amount of love that I feel. And again, sometimes it's overwhelming to me, quite honestly. I can get very emotional in your presence. So I'm glad there's some social distance between us. All right. But it's important to stay connected to what you love about your work. Again, I'm going to teach you about your brain. Your brain wants to remind you about all the negative things. Don't let your brain run your life. We will talk about this. Okay. So here's what we have to identify. Compassion fatigue is an occupational hazard. In lab animal, there's no question about it. You wouldn't have compassion fatigue if you worked at Home Depot. I don't know why I keep saying Home Depot, but that's usually my go-to. Or there'd be very low chances that you would have compassion fatigue working in an environment like that. So your work does make you susceptible to that. And that's important that we call that out. And there is shared responsibility. I believe it's a 50-50, and I don't know, maybe it's skewed one way or another. I believe that the organization, the institution, the facility has some shared responsibility in eliminating many unnecessary stressors. And these are big conversations, and I'm not addressing that in this webinar at all right now. Those are, conversations that are above this webinar. This webinar is for you, the individual. What can you do to help yourself? Because that's who I can help. That's who you can control too, right? You can control yourself. You can't control your organization or institution. So let's start with you. So here are the 3 strategies I'm going to talk with you about. I'm going to talk with you about what it means to manage your mind and why that's everything. I'm going to talk with you about practicing self-care like it's your second job. I'm also going to talk with you about, some ways to actually process your emotions so that they're not building up and that you're able to allow them and move through them with a little bit more grace and ease. So let's start with my favorite topic of all, your mind. And my mind is my favorite topic. So here's what's actually happening. Like, we are all either being managed by our mind or managing our mind. You get to decide. And the vast majority of human beings are being managed by their mind. And now that we're in a pandemic, it's very easy to see. Many people are being managed by their mind. And what being managed by their mind is that they're in a constant state of anxiety and panic. They're not able to bring themselves back because their mind, of course, is on default. Their reptilian brain, the amygdala, which is looking at the world through black and white terms, is this safe or dangerous? There's no gray for the reptilian primitive brain. It's like, oh, this is dangerous, right? It has no ability to sort of see the gray area, if you will. The gray, I shouldn't say the gray area when I'm talking about the brain, but whereas the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that allows us to have some executive functioning, to be able to think about what we want to think about and to make some decisions for our future and to decide how we want to think and what we want to believe. And in a time like this, most important skill I can ever teach you. And I cannot tell you how many I just got. And I'm pretty sure I know Jenny's going to be on here, but I got an email this morning from someone who said, without the knowledge of learning how to manage my mind, I wouldn't be able to tolerate this. I got an email the other day from a client who said the same thing. She said, I would be either divorced or drinking if I didn't know how to manage my mind. So let me teach you that. Our brain on default really has a negative spin. It sees the world in a negative lens. It sees negative things to be more powerful to our brain. And that's why we're still alive as human beings. As a species, that's why we've survived, because our brain looks at things in the world that are negative and it makes them very important. And the negativity bias teaches us that for every one negative thing that happens, we need 3 positive things to actually counteract it. So you can see how we're sort of set up to fail in a way. And right now what's happening is your brain is in Disneyland because it is able to just freely go to the worst case scenario. And It's not hard for our brains to go to the worst case scenario, and we have to allow it to go to the worst case scenario. You have to allow your brain to go there, spend a little time writing and journaling all the worst things that could happen, and then figure out what you would do if that happens. When you are able to empty your brain out in that way and get all those worries out there, then you can put that aside and go, okay, those are all possibilities. But what's the best case scenario? Because my friends, the best case scenario is equally possible, but our brains don't ever want to take us there. You need to direct your brain to the best case scenario. On its own, it's not going there. It will be stuck over here that we're never going to have toilet paper again. And my neighbor was telling me there's no butter in the stores and we're never going to have butter or flour. That's where your brain will hang out. So you have to direct it to what is the best case scenario. Let's talk about emotions. So, where do they come from? Well, here's where most of us don't know, or we've been given some erroneous facts about our emotions. Most of us think that our emotions, our feelings come from circumstances. Most of us think that our feeling of anxiety comes from the empty toilet paper aisle, but it does not. Or most of us think that our grief comes from having to cull healthy animals. But it does not. Stick with me. Most of us think that our feeling of anxiety comes from COVID-19, but it does not. Circumstances do not cause our feelings. Circumstances trigger thoughts in our brain, and it's our thoughts that cause our feelings. Now, let me step back and explain how that's true. Let's even use COVID-19 for an instance. Is it not true that there are people, so COVID-19 is a circumstance in the world. There are people who have thoughts about it, such as it's a hoax, and they feel non-threatened. They feel dismissed. There are other people looking at the same exact circumstance who have thoughts about it like, this is going to kill massive amounts of people, and they feel anxiety. So it's our thoughts that cause our feelings. Same thing as it relates to euthanasia. So euthanasia, culling, I'll use those because honestly, think about the world. Euthanasia of animals happens in all animal work. And if euthanasia caused grief, we would always feel grief when animals are culled or euthanized. And we don't. Sometimes we feel relief. Sometimes we feel anger. Sometimes we feel guilt. Sometimes we do feel grief and sadness, yes. But how is it different? Why do we feel one of those emotions and not the other? Because of what we're thinking, because of the thought in our brain about that. So right now, I know so many of you have been directed to take down your populations. You have a thought such as probably something along the lines of, this is such a waste. And then you feel anger, perhaps. Yeah, okay. But what I'm getting to here is that it's your thoughts that cause your feelings always. And that's good to know. So I'm going to share with you what's known as the self-coaching model. And this is a model that I teach all of my clients that I work with about how to manage their emotional lives. And what it teaches us is, and I'm going to break it apart for you, circumstances are facts. They're things that we can prove in a court of law. They're not subjective at all, right? They trigger a thought in your brain. The thought in your brain is a sentence in your mind about the circumstance. That creates your feelings. Your feelings are a physical sensation that you feel because of what you are thinking. Not because of what's happening, but because of what you're thinking about what's happening. And your feelings always fuel your behavior. All of us either act, enact, or react based on how we feel. And our actions then, the effect of our actions are the results that we see in our lives. So I'm going to break this apart for you a little bit more and kind of show you where your power resides. The first and most important thing is to separate out facts from thoughts. So over here, I've listed a whole bunch of facts. COVID-19 is a pandemic. We are practicing social distancing. Then again, these are like, I made up some of these facts, but I know they're true for some of you. You know, we're on a rotating schedule. And again, it might be a fact, may not. Again, insert. I'm just trying to demonstrate for you what examples of facts are. We euthanized X amount of mice yesterday. An example could be so-and-so said. So a fact could also be the words that somebody said, quote, unquote. Someone told us to cull all the quote, unquote, non-essential animals. Researchers said, quote unquote, they're just mice. Right? Those are all facts. If somebody said it, there was a witness or whatever, then that becomes a fact. Then you have thoughts about all those facts. So again, from the top, right? We have a thought, I'm afraid I'm going to get sick. I feel so isolated. I have no one to talk to about all of this. Their lives were wasted. That is such an insensitive comment. They don't get it, right? So those are your thoughts about those facts. And I know you think that those are just like automatic thoughts, but I'm going to teach you that that's not true. But let me take it one step further. I want to show you the combination or the connection between facts, thoughts, and feelings. So when you think the thought, I'm afraid to get sick, you will feel fear. When you think the thought, I feel so isolated, you will feel, lonely. Oh, I can't see behind here. When you think the thought, I have no one to talk to, you will feel alone. When you think their lives were wasted, you may feel anger. When you think that is such an insensitive comment, you may feel irate. When you think they don't get it, you may feel angry, right? So those thoughts are what create your emotions. Now, the question that comes up is, how do we feel better? Most of us think that we need to change our circumstances in order to feel better. And that's a very disempowering way to look at the world, because if you think you have to change other people and what they say or do, or you have to change a virus out in the world in order to feel better, or you have to change what the president says or doesn't say in order for you to feel better, you'll be very disempowered because you can't control other people. So the way to change how you feel is to change what you're thinking. And many of us don't know that this is an option. Here's what you need to recognize. Your thoughts are a choice. What you choose to think about everything is a choice. What you choose to think is also changeable. It's optional. But why it matters is because your thoughts are essentially what create your entire experience. The world is happening. Things are happening that we don't get to control. We then have thoughts about them that create our feelings and our behavior. That's all on us. We don't get to control that. We get to control what we make those things mean by how we interpret them with our brain. That is your power source. That's the only thing you can ever control. And most of us don't know we can control it and aren't using it. So I'm getting very worked up, as you can see. I'm a little passionate about this. So what do you see on the screen? What is it? Is it a rabbit or is it a duck? You tell me. Or is it a rabbit duck? Well, it's either. It depends on both. Yeah, I'm seeing both. Oh, I love that you guys are all answering that. Duck. Oh my gosh, so many of you don't see the rabbit. This is so funny. It makes a poor rabbit and a poor duck. So see if you can see, for those of you, I see it now. Some of you were not able to see the rabbit. So the rabbit, it's the duck bill is its ears, and the rabbit is its nose is over on. I can't even direct you with my cursor. Ears not proportional. I love all you people are now scrutinizing the artist. That's awesome. That's awesome. So it all depends on how you interpret it, just like our thoughts. That's why I'm bringing this up. This is what our thoughts are. There's a fact in the world. How we're looking at that, how we interpret that is the way we see it. The same with this image. That is your thinking. Your thoughts are your interpretation of facts. That's it. That's how somebody can look at COVID-19. We're all looking at the same exact circumstance in the world. And there were people, let's be honest, there were people in Florida who last week were on spring break. Literally, there's no way they had thoughts like, this is serious. They didn't have thoughts like that at all. They had thoughts like, this is no big deal. Only old people get it. And therefore, they felt very dismissive, and they were on spring break. And you have other people who are looking, again, we're all looking at the same circumstance, and they think this is a hoax. And other people who are thinking this is going to erase humanity, and all variations of that. So here's why this is so important, is because circumstances in and of themselves aren't good or bad. COVID-19 isn't good or bad until you make it one way or another with your thoughts. That's how the spring breakers were not seeing it as a negative. They were seeing it as, neutral, or even as a positive. They were seeing it as something that they weren't even going to have to deal with. Now, I'm not suggesting that we think that every fact is good. I'm not suggesting that we interpret all things in the world as good. But what I am showing you is that you always get to decide. What I am showing you is that your power lies in your interpretation of the facts around you. That's where your power resides. And yes, there are plenty of things that we all want to interpret as negative, and we all want to think thoughts about them that create negative emotions for us. And we have every right to do that. I don't want to think happy thoughts about, animal abuse or child abuse or murder. I don't want to think positive thoughts about that. So yes, I do want to interpret those things as negative. But that, again, is my choice. There are people who don't. I know it's bizarre, but the vast majority of us do. But I'm just giving you that. Because what it comes down to is when you start to understand this concept, and for many of you, it may be new, it may be something you've never even heard before, or maybe you have. I'm just teaching you truth here. This isn't anything that I created. This is cognitive psychology is what I'm teaching you. If you spend any time in CBT, you would know that this is cognitive psychology. But I love this quote: the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. We have that ability as humans, and that's such a privilege. It's such a privilege. The dogs behind me that are snoring away, they don't have that ability to choose one thought over another, but we do. And it's work and it's effort, and we do it thought by thought by thought by thought when we catch ourselves. So the question to ask yourself, when you catch yourself feeling a way you don't want to be feeling, you ask yourself this question at the top of the screen here: how else can I think about this situation? How might somebody else see this situation? What other ways can I think about this? So I'm going to give you some suggestions right here. I've given you the same circumstances over here. So a different way to think about it is, if I get sick, I'll deal with it. I can look for other ways to connect with people. We can do video meetings. No life is ever wasted. I want to offer you that as a thought. I mean, I want to offer you that. And I know that's probably pushing up against, but who gets to decide if a life is wasted? Like we're making that decision ourselves, but we can just as easily decide that no life is ever wasted. That life in and of itself, life that was created, was never wasted, no matter how short it was, no matter what the circumstances were surrounding the end of it. Like, you can choose to believe that if you want. So I'm offering you that as a gift. Okay, in regards to being told to call all the non-essential animals, I don't think he realizes how we interpret that. Like, you can choose to think that about someone too, especially, again, many of you are working alongside of people who are not walking in your shoes. They don't get it like you do. And you can, instead of being angry about it, you can choose to be like, you know what? They don't understand. They're not in my mind. They don't see what I see. And it's okay. It literally is okay. We don't all have to see everything the same. And for those that say, you know what, they're just mice or just rats or just whatever, you can choose to think they're confused about me and how I see my work and my animals. Do you see how that changes everything by just choosing to think about things differently? And again, it creates a whole different set of emotions. Again, nothing changed. I gave you still the same exact circumstances here on the left. But now when we think about it differently, look at the difference in the emotions that we feel. Welcome to the privilege of being a human being where you can decide what to think about things. When you catch yourself being angry, irate, frustrated with people, you can step back and go, okay, but how else might I be able to think about this in a way that makes me feel even just a smidge better? What else is available to me of how else I can interpret the circumstance? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Wait a minute, Julie, this sounds like, your life is all rainbows and roses and fairy tales and fairies. But what if there isn't a positive thought available? Well, that's true. Sometimes there isn't a positive thought available. And I want to offer you an emotion that many of you may not realize is an emotion, and it's called neutral. Neutral actually is an emotion. And I don't want you to confuse it with indifference. Indifference is more skewed on the negative side of emotions. It's more of a negative emotion, more of an emotion that doesn't feel good. Neutral actually is more in line with acceptance. And neutral is more along the lines of, I may not like it, but it is what it is, and I have to accept it. I may not like it, but I have to accept it. And when we work with animals, we have to find a place of neutral, because there are many things that we are going to find that we don't like, that don't end the way we want them to. And we have to be able to find ways to help ourselves, because when we get caught in anger, overwhelm, stress, frustration, and deep sadness, we end up hurting ourselves. Not only do we hurt ourselves, but then everybody else that we're in contact with, all of the other animals, suffer too, because you're not able to be present with them anymore. So I do want to offer you the concept, or just the idea of what neutral might feel like. And I want you to play around with it a little bit, especially now. And again, I'm not asking you to like it. I'm not asking you to like having to euthanize healthy animals. I know it goes against, so much of what you're all about. It just doesn't seem right to you, and you have thoughts about that. But I want to just see if you can find yourself in a place of, okay, you know what? Like, these are unprecedented times, and it is what this is. And I know that might be asking a lot, but just go there with me for a little bit here. Let's see. Okay, continuing on. Got so much for you guys. So we talked a little bit about managing our mind. The other thing we want to talk about here is self-care. Okay, what does self-care look like? Well, first and foremost, it's just like what it sounds like. It is literally taking care of ourselves in all the ways that we can. And I have some worksheets that you'll have the opportunity to have, so that you can sort of play around with creating a self-care plan for yourself and routine, and being able to explore all of the areas of self-care. And why it matters so much is because you're not a machine. Because you need time to reboot, to regroup, to rejuvenate. You need time to do all of those things. So here are the 5 aspects of self-care. And, there's the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, and the social. So if I were to break those apart, the mental is balancing between stimulating your brain and giving it a break. It's between learning things and then sort of just zoning out a little bit. And there's a beautiful balance in between the two. Then there's physical. That's what we're most familiar with. That's our health, nutrition, physical wellness. We kind of know all of that. We seem to be like, that's what most of us sort of relate to with self-care, and that's perfectly fine. But there's more aspects to it. Then there's spiritual self-care. This is our own personal practice, which is essentially about our own purpose. This could be connecting with a higher power, or it may not. It could be religious, or it may not. It's all completely personal, but it really is about what gives you purpose in your life, and honoring that, and nurturing that, if you will. Then there is social self-care. I know it's hard right now. You got to be creative. We can still connect with people, and dare I say, and I know this might come off, I don't know how it's going to come off, but I'm just going to say what I feel. There's never been a better time to be in a pandemic than the world we're living in right now. Like, let's be honest. If this was 1930 and we were having to socially isolate, like, we'd be going stir crazy. We have Zoom, we have phones, we have ways to connect with people. And dare I say, we have to be creative in using those things. I get it. It's tough. It's really tough. I'm going stir crazy too. And then lastly is emotional self-care. And this really is such about, helping you understand and acknowledge your own feelings. So much about what's going on right now, I know, is creating such a moral dilemma for you. And I know in talking with Dr. Buckmaster yesterday, we talked a lot about how the whole idea around having to euthanize healthy animals and the moral dilemma that that's creating, because no good is coming out of it, quote unquote, or there's no science being gleaned from that. But let me share with you what she shared with me. And I thought it was just such a great way to think about it. She said, we're used to looking at the loss of animals' lives and thinking about what we're getting from that. We're, the science, we're benefiting from the science, the research, we're benefiting, and other beings are benefiting from that. And she said, but this time the recipient to their loss of life is you. They're losing their life to keep you safe. And I know that when most of you think about that, it's going to make you feel guilty. And I want to ask that instead of feeling guilty, because that's optional to feel guilty, another option is to feel gratitude. And, I think that is, it's a hard leap to make, but at the same time, I want to remind you that you too get to choose to believe that no life is ever wasted. There's never been a better time to create for yourself what I call a recovery protocol. In the worksheet, I give you a little space to do that. A recovery protocol is a protocol you set up for yourself at an extremely difficult time. So under normal situations, generally speaking, probably when a study is going to come to an end and there's going to be a takedown. And so this would be ideal for that time, so that you have this protocol already in place that this week, let's say if this were in normal times, this week there's going to be a takedown and it's going to be you're going to have a tough week. You already know that about yourself. So what a recovery protocol looks like is you just create supportive things in your life that you kind of turn on, if you will. And, these are just some ideas. This is not an exhaustive list. Now, I created this whole recovery protocol long before we were in quarantine. So at that time, online grocery ordering was, a bit of a novel concept, as is Instacart, like when you're getting groceries delivered. But so bear with me on that. But this is the types of things I'm talking about, is what do you need to create in your life when you know it's going to be a difficult time for you, so that you make it easier on yourself. Maybe you have your support team, whether that be body workers or other people that, mental health support or support groups, or you ask people in your family for help because you know that this is going to be a tough week for you. So they watch your kids for a night so you can just kind of regroup. Maybe you take a technology sabbatical during that time where you just disengage from all of that and attend to your own needs. Maybe you get the best prescription ever, which is nature, and you create some time for yourself where you're outdoors in whatever capacity that could be. Maybe part of your recovery protocol is saying no to lots of the things that you normally say yes to, because this is going to be a time where you need to conserve your physical and emotional resources, because you're sort of in that time, sort of think about it like as a cocoon where you're rebuilding, if you will. And I love the metaphor of the cocoon, because when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon and there's that chrysalis that's formed, right? The caterpillar completely dissolves in order to become the butterfly. Like, it resembles nothing like its former self. And it does that, and it's sort of that same metaphor that you can use for yourself as you are recovering from some challenging times. Okay, moving on. Holy smokes, I had so much to say and just a few minutes left. All right. And good. This is good timing. This I have a handout for, so to be honest with you, I'm probably going to just move through it and tell you that this is all in the handout. What I've created for you are 10 steps that I think are the best steps to support yourself when you're having an extremely emotional time. Now, again, when there's culling, again, so ideal. And I'm not going to go through it now because I just want to get through the rest of these slides in the time, but you have this exact handout. Everything on here is available, and I'll give you the link of how you can get that. And look at number 10, we actually did. That was the self-compassion exercise that we did, and I wrote it all out for you so you can practice that again. I hope that was helpful for you. All right, so our takeaways. Manage your mind consistently. You get to decide to be the director of your brain or to be the victim of it. Practice self-care like it's your job. This is the time. There's never been a better time to dial up your self-care. There's never been a better time for personal development. Like I said earlier, who do you want to be on the other side of this? Me, I'm going to be better. I can tell you, and I invite you, come with me. And the last takeaway is about learning to process our emotions and do the things that we need to do rather than run away from them. And our natural inclination is to run away from them because none of us have been taught how to feel our feelings. That's why I'm a life coach, because I teach that to people, because I didn't know how to myself. So I developed eating disorders, drug and alcohol abuse, because I had no idea what to do with my emotions. I came out on the other side of that, and now I teach people, hey, here's what it looks like to allow yourself to feel your feelings. And again, it's not our fault. Not one of us has been taught that. I'm going to give you an opportunity to learn how to do all that. So K minus A equals 0. Here is a equation for you. It means knowledge minus action equals no change. So I want to really give you the space to invite you to have more support, especially at a time like this. Here are the worksheets. This is a great way to first support yourself. There are 3 worksheets. They all come together. All you need to do, you can take a screenshot real quick. This will be in the recording. It's at www.rekindlesolutions.com/radical. Radical because I named this webinar Radical Self-Care for Radical Times. Okay? So that's how to get that, and I'll share that at the end if you need it. And real quickly, here's what I decided to do. For the first time ever, I have decided, I have an online course about compassion fatigue, and for the first time ever, I've decided to, and I offer it only 3 or 4 times a year. And I'm coming up to offer it again. And I decided this morning at 3 o'clock in the morning that I'm going to offer it only to people in Lab Animal. I want to create a community and a container and a space for just you all. I added 6 live weekly webinars. All of them will be recorded. There are 6 modules. They get dripped out to you every week. It's all on demand. You get to engage with it when you want. You also get 2 60-minute coaching sessions with me, private coaching sessions. You also have the ability to anonymously ask anything that you want. It's all posted within this private site. And you get to ask any question and get coaching from me. And nobody knows who you are and what you had to say. And again, I wanted to hold this space just for you. It became very clear to me that you are a community of people who now more than ever really deeply need support. And I want you to know that I hear that. I want you to know that I see that. I want you to know how much you matter to me. The modules, the 6 modules are how to coach yourself to feel better. That model that I taught you, circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results, I will teach you that in such depth that you'll be able to solve any problem you have. The second module is about relationships. It's about dealing with quote unquote difficult people, work people, people in your families, whatever. The third is about creating boundaries for yourself. I have come to realize that most people who work with animals have very limited boundaries. They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to protect themselves. And that's really important in this work. The 4th module is about stress reduction. I have some pretty unique ways to reduce stress, not your average stuff. The 5th is way more on self-care. I call it badass self-care. The 6th is such a beautiful piece, and it's about mindfulness and learning the power of meditation. So many of you think that you can't meditate. There are bonus modules in here about compassion fatigue and how to be more confident and how to create goals and set goals. Like there's so much. It's such a personal development course, and registration is open. I push the date back because I'm doing a bunch of other webinars for the Lab Animal community, and I want to invite so many of you in to have a place. Like I said earlier, I know you don't have a lot of support, and it just became clear to me that I could offer you that in such a way that, I think can help you so much. I've had quite a few Lab Animal people go through the program already, and the price is $297. The coaching sessions in and of itself are pretty much worth that. What else can I tell you? I think that's everything. There's how you can enroll. And I know I've gone over a couple minutes. I really want to honor your time. I really want to thank you for being here. I want to set you off with one important quote from Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was a psychologist who also endured the Holocaust. And he said this in relation to being imprisoned at Auschwitz. He said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And we are not being able to choose our circumstances right now, but we always get to choose our attitude. We always get to choose what we think. So here's all of my stuff. I have a podcast. I spoke about you all on the podcast this week. There's all my contact information. I'm going to stop my screen share, see if there's any questions. I see lots of thank yous. Great job. Let me see. Where am I? Where are you? You're over here. Yay. Thank you. Any questions? Let me just look over here. Question, how do we keep our techs moving to keep coming to work during these dark times? I think what we need to do there is be a beacon for people. I think we need to validate people. I think we need to let people know, our technicians, that we see them, that we see that this is a really hard time for them, that we see that they're hurting, that we see that they're being asked to do things that is really challenging for them. And you know, Oprah Winfrey said it best. She said, at the basis of all human beings is the need for validation. And by the way, I'm going to stay on here as long as there's, hi Danielle, as long as there's questions. So, you know, I get it. Lots of you have to jump off, but as long as there's questions, I'm going to stick on here. But Oprah said, you know, she said, I thought this was so beautiful. She said, you know, I interviewed tens of thousands of people on my show. And she said, including many presidents. And she said, without a fault, every single one of the interviews ended with people asking afterwards, was that okay? Was I good enough? And what she learned, and what I've learned from her, is that everyone is always looking for validation. So to answer that question, just give people validation, that you see them, that you hear them, that you know that they are feeling in dark times. And sometimes that's all we can ever do. Thank you so much. Will recording? Yes, there will be a recording available. Let's see if there's any other questions. Okay. Let me go back to the chat. Let's see here. This is very helpful. Oh, good. Be safe out there. Yes, everyone be safe. And you know, I know there's not about 247. One of the things I didn't get to say, and it was on my notes here. Two last things. Most importantly, oh my gosh, I wrote myself a note here. And I want this to be on the recording. I want to thank you for what you do and who you are. Your work matters. You matter. You're also about to change the world as it relates to the work that so many of you are doing, and so many of you will be engaged in finding solutions to COVID-19. I know that. So from my family to your family, I thank you. And I also thank Lynn Walsh again for making this all possible, and MSMR. And if there aren't any questions, wash your hands. Yes, I love you guys. You're the best. Changing your thinking, good. Yeah, good. We've been sending out happy tidbits once a day. That is so wonderful. That is so great. All right then, my friends. Be well. Be safe. Look for the light even in dark times, because it's always there. And again, I support you. Come and join me in my Compassion Fatigue RX course, and I'll take really good care of you, and you will come out the other side much different version of yourself. All right. Take care. Goodbye.